People love to talk. They call me evil. They call me cursed. They say I sold my soul. Maybe I did. But let me tell you something. Being poor is the worst curse of all. I grew up in Zimbabwe, in a house that was barely standing, with a mother who worked herself to death and still couldn't afford a decent meal for us. I saw poverty break women, turn men into drunkards, make families enemies over a bag of maize meal. At school, I sat next to girls who never had shoes, girls who ate sadza with salt because there was nothing else. I knew girls who were forced into marriages at 15 just to help their families survive. I knew from a young age that life was war, and in war, only the smart survive. So when I turned 22, I made my choice. I wasn't going to be like those women who spent their lives struggling, hoping a man would save them, waiting for miracles that never came. I was going to save myself. Marrying Dumisani, my way out. I arrived in South Africa in 2018 with nothing but a fake CV and a handbag full of cheap clothes. I had one goal: get an ID. Without papers, I was nothing. I couldn't open a bank account, couldn't rent a place, couldn't work anywhere that paid well. And I refused to be like those Zimbabwean women who washed clothes for 100 rand per day, living like cockroaches in Hillbrow. So I found a man. His name was Dumisani, a South African, jobless but full of confidence, sitting at taverns all day, pretending he was someone important. Men like him are easy to manipulate. I let him believe I was in love with him. I cooked for him. I let him do whatever he wanted to me at night, acted like his queen. I made sure he believed he was the boss. And when the time was right, I told him that we should get married. I remember the day of the wedding. There was no ring, no celebration, just a trip to Home Affairs where I smiled for the camera and signed my name. Then walked out with the one thing I needed most: South African citizenship. That night, Dumisani wanted to celebrate. "Babe, now you are my wife. You are my responsibility," he said, touching me with his rough hands. I wanted to vomit, but I let him have his moment because I knew I was done with him. 2 months later, I left. I packed my bags while he was out drinking and never looked back. He called me, begged me, threatened me. I laughed and blocked him. I was free. Entering the world of blessers. I started dressing better, doing my hair at expensive salons, wearing heels instead of sneakers. I went where the money was: Sandton, Waterkloof, Rosebank. I studied the women in those places, how they moved, how they spoke, how they attracted powerful men. And then one night at a rooftop lounge, I met Baba Joe, a rich Zimbabwean mysterious man. He was in his 50s, wearing a Rolex that cost more than a house, with a presence that made everyone go silent when he entered the room. I knew immediately he was the one. I played my role perfectly. I laughed at his jokes. I touched his hand lightly when I spoke. I let him think he was in control. By the end of the night, I had 10,000 in my bag just for talking to him. By the end of the month, I was driving a Mercedes CLA. By the end of the year, I had an apartment in Centurion, a wardrobe full of designer clothes, and a lifestyle that most women can only dream of. I had won, or so I thought. The night everything changed. One night Baba Joe called me. "I want you to come to my house tonight, alone." There was something in his voice that felt different. I went. His mansion was in Waterkloof. It was even bigger than I remembered, but that night the house felt so quiet. He led me to a private room I had never seen before. The walls were lined with golden symbols. The air smelled of burning incense, and in the center of the room was a large glass cage. Inside the cage, coiled up, watching me with black, soulless eyes, was a python. I stepped back. "What is this?" I asked. Baba Joe smiled. "This is how I stay rich, and tonight you will understand." I should have ran, but I didn't, because by then I was too deep in the life. He handed me a small cup of red liquid. "Drink." I hesitated. "Do you want to remain rich? Do you want more money?" I thought about the life I had left behind. I thought about Dumisani, drinking himself to death in Mamelodi, probably still hoping I would come back. I thought about my mother struggling in Zimbabwe, still believing God will rescue her. I then closed my eyes and drank. The liquid was thick and bitter. It was like blood. Then he told me to lie down on the bed, wearing nothing but a red cloth. And then I heard it, the sound of the cage opening. I felt the cold, heavy weight of the snake moving onto the bed. I felt it slithering over my skin, tightening around my legs, my waist. I felt a power I couldn't describe rushing through my veins. And when it was over, Baba Joe handed me 100,000 rands in cash. "Welcome to the real world," he whispered. That night changed everything. The consequences of choosing wealth over peace. From that day, money was never a problem. I could ask for anything, it would appear. My bank balance never ran dry. I traveled to Dubai, Paris, Seychelles. I stopped looking at price tags. I stopped worrying about bills. I laughed at women who struggled, who relied on useless boyfriends to survive. I had won, but I had a price to pay. I started waking up with bruises on my body. I started hearing hissing sounds at night. Every full moon, I had to go back to Baba Joe's mansion for another ritual. And then the deaths started. First, my younger brother in Zimbabwe, then one of my closest friends, then a girl I had been competing with for another blesser. Each one died mysteriously. No sickness, no accident, just gone. That's when I knew I had crossed a line I can never uncross. Trying to escape. I tried to leave. I went back to Zimbabwe hoping the spirits would not follow me. But even in my mother's house, I could feel something watching me. I had nightmares. I woke up screaming. I would hear hissing in the dark, even when there was no snake. People told me to go to church to pray, to ask for forgiveness, but I knew the truth. Once you sleep with a snake, it never lets you go. And if I had to choose again, I would still pick the money, because at the end of the day, poverty is the worst curse of all.